Humans have been interested in sculpture ever since our first ancient cave-dwelling ancestor carved the first human-like shape out of rock. Many of us are no more skilled at the art of sculpture than those ancient humans are, but there are some who are blessed with phenomenal talents. We're celebrating those artists in this video, which is full of sculptures so breathtaking you won't believe that they're real. The Appenin Colossus of Vaglia, Italy, is the most singularly dramatic piece of sculpture work in a stunning Renaissance villa and associated gardens full of outstanding art. The piece is also known as the Colossus of Villa Demidoff. The villa and its surroundings were commissioned by the aristocrat Francesco I de' Medici, the second Grand Duke of Tuscany, during the 16th century. It took 12 years to complete the work in full, but the finished product was worth every minute and hour of those 12 years. The maze-like collection of lakes, natural caves, and imposing structures have an almost dreamlike quality, but the tortured state of the Appenin Colossus provides a somber backdrop. The gardens were maintained throughout most of the 16th and 17th centuries, but had become abandoned by the beginning of the 18th. It took Ferdinand III, another Grand Duke of Tuscany, to recognize the value of the gardens and have them restored to their former beauty. He was so struck by their beauty that he even had the villa demolished so the gardens could be opened to the public. The State Library of Victoria in Melbourne, Australia, wasn't built directly atop the ruins of the previous library. However, you could easily believe that to be the case if you were to lay eyes on the sculpture known as Architectural Fragment by Petrus Spronk, which is on the pavement outside the library. Spronk's work of art is what appears to be the upper corner of the entrance to a grand library slowly sinking into the ground as if being swallowed by the cement. It looks suitably old, having been based on the architectural style of the 19th century, but it's actually only been there since January 1993. It's a strange thing to look at, but that's exactly how Spronk intended it to be. He intended his work to be a commentary on the downfall of civilizations, both past and present, and how the loss or destruction of knowledge and information always precipitates those downfalls. We'd point out that Spronk's point is defeated by the fact that there's an enormous library still open directly over the road from his work, but that would be mean-spirited. The idea of the pavement eating an old library is, of course, ridiculous. Solid stone and rock can't eat anybody or anything. Or perhaps it can? That's the impression we're left with after seeing our next incredible sculpture, which was created by the Norwegian sculptor Eva Bakkeslet for the Karingjoy Land Art Biennale in 2015. The pioneering artist completed 3 sculptures over the course of a single week for the event, but this one is by far the most imposing. It's called Mind the Gap, and turns a natural split in the rock into a fearsome set of jaws and teeth. To create the effect, Bakkeslet used a combination of sticks and straws fixed into place with a cementing agent. All at once, the split stone went from being a curious part of the ancient landscape to something entirely more sinister. Unfortunately, this isn't a work of art you can inspect in person. The teeth were made using perishable materials, and the sculpture was open to the elements, so the teeth have long since disappeared, and the stone is once again merely a stone. Civil servants often get a rough deal. They're not politicians, but they have to put up with decisions made by politicians. When they have good ideas, a politician will often take credit for them. Their roles are seen as dull and bureaucratic, even though, in reality, they're often among the most important jobs in the country. For all of those reasons, the monument to the unknown bureaucrat was created in the Icelandic capital of Reykjavik. It's an artist's way of saying thank you to the countless thousands of anonymous civil servants who keep the country moving. The artist in question is Magnus Thomasson, who completed his work in 1994. You've probably heard the phrase faceless bureaucrat before, and Thomasson takes that phrase and makes it literal with his sculpture. The civil servant's lower torso, suit, and briefcase are all superbly detailed, but his head and upper torso are still encased in the single slab of volcanic basalt that Magnus carved the rest of it from. The statue is positioned on the walk to Reykjavik's City Hall, so hundreds of Iceland's real-life civil servants walk past it every day. For the millions of arachnophobes out there, the only thing worse than the idea of a 30-foot-tall spider is the idea of a 30-foot-tall spider that can move thousands of miles. Here's one that's done exactly that. It's called Maman, and it once stood inside the walls of the Tate Modern in London, England. Today, the sculpture is in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. The nightmare-inducing creation is the work of Louise Bourgeois, who was 95 years old at the time she designed it. Most of the work of putting the bronze, marble, and steel frame together was handled by other people, but they all worked according to the veteran sculptor's instructions. The work was done in time for the opening of the Unilever series in the Tate's Turbine Hall in the year 2000. It moved back and forth between the Tate and the Tate Modern until 2005, when the National Gallery of Canada bought it for $3.2 million. Maman means mother, and the work is apparently a representation of the artist's childhood anxieties. In expressing her own childhood fears, she's probably triggered the childhood fears of the many millions of people who've seen the sculpture in the past 20 years. Speaking of sculptures that are unsettling to look at, here's the statue known as Juodasis Vaiduoklis in Lithuania. When translated into English, its name means the Black Ghost. The statue depicts a ghoulish figure hauling itself up from the depths of the water in the historic Lithuanian city of Klaipėda. In its hand it carries a lantern, and its face is hidden by a cloak. The Black Ghost was added to the waterfront of the old port by sculptors Svajonas Jurkus and Sergejus Plotnikovas in 2010. It's almost 8 feet tall, but most of its frame is below the walkway. The statue is a reference to a legend that dates back to 1595, which says a local man named Hans von Heide, a guard at the nearby Klaipėda castle, was approached by a hooded figure who emerged from the water's edge while he was out doing his nightly rounds. The ghost warned Hans that the city's supply of timber and grain wouldn't be sufficient for the years ahead. The guard informed his superiors, and they apparently heeded his word by increasing their supplies. They were just in time. Droughts, bad weather, and supply shortages blighted the area for the next 2 years, and the people of Klaipėda survived only because of the hooded figure's warning. There's something very unusual about the sculptures of Bruno Catalano. To be quite honest, they're not quite all there. That isn't because they've been attacked or damaged, though. His bronze human figurines look precisely as he intended them to. Catalano calls his strange creations les voyageurs, and had them installed in the French city of Marseille to celebrate the city's recognition as the European Capital of Culture in 2013. The artist has never fully explained why the people he sculpts have enormous holes in them. He says only that each of them has left something behind, and so the holes are symbolic of loss. Artistic sentiments aside, the second mystery about Catalano's sculptures is how they remain standing. In many cases, the holes are so big that it looks like they should collapse through lack of support. Somehow, Catalano always finds a clever way to leave just enough of the frame in place to support whatever needs to be attached to it. Even the physics involved in Bruno's statues ought to be considered a work of art. The most frequently visited and admired of the animals in Taipei Zoo, Taiwan, are the hippos. It might sound like there's nothing unusual about that, but only until you find out that the hippos aren't real. They're creative sculptures, designed to fit the theme of the zoo's African animal area and crafted in such a way that they look like they're about to rise out of the ground and attack the zoo's human visitors. The sculptures are the creative vision of the zoo's former director, Chen Pao-chung, who wanted to create a special hippo square to let visitors know they were leaving one area of the zoo and heading into another. Even though there are thousands of real animals in the zoo, including quite a lot of exotic and rare beasts, the hippos frequently command more attention from photographers. Perhaps that's because getting close to these hippos is a lot safer than getting close to the real hippos who also live inside the zoo. A sculpture of a hippo isn't capable of attacking a human being, but a real one might do so happily and without warning. Since 2007, the artist Tony Tassett has been keeping his eye on the people of America, and we mean that literally. He first showed off his massive eye sculpture, imaginatively entitled Eye, as part of a temporary display in Chicago, Illinois in 2007. The hyper-realistic eyeball, which comes complete with thin red veins, is 30 feet tall and made of fiberglass. Apparently, the color pattern of the iris is styled after Tassett's own eyes. He didn't find much use for his eye sculpture after the temporary display ended, so it spent a few years in storage before making an appearance at an art festival in St. Louis, and then finally finding its way to Texas in 2013 after being bought by a hotel in Dallas. The Jewel Hotel on Main Street prides itself on its sculpture garden, and it thought the eye would be a perfect addition to the collection. Refreshingly, Tony doesn't have a pretentious or unlikely explanation about why he created the eye. He says only that he wanted to make something awesome. After you get past the weirdness of a gigantic eye staring at you as you make your way down the street, it's hard to disagree with him that he was successful in his aim. Tony Tassett's eye is not the strangest work of sculpture in the United States of America. It probably doesn't even come close to that title. Instead, we nominate the creation known as Spoon Bridge and Cherry in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It's an absurdist piece of art that's been both amusing and bemusing the city's locals since it was erected in the 1980s. To call it silly and whimsical would be a significant understatement on both counts. The sculpture was created by the husband and wife couple of Claes Oldenburg and Kustja van Bruggen in 1985 as a new centerpiece for the Walker Art Center's sculpture garden. The spoon weighs 5,800 pounds, which makes it sturdy enough to deal with the weight of the 1,200-pound cherry perched on its edge. To make it even more absurd, the stem of the cherry is a fountain that sprays water into the spoon's bowl, which runs off into the pond beneath it. The unveiling of the Spoon Bridge and Cherry wasn't met with universal acclaim back in 1985, but the locals now consider it part of their city's identity. Actually, we've changed our minds. The most absurd sculpture in the United States of America is surely the Bull Weevil Monument in Enterprise, Alabama. Erected in December 1919, this staggeringly unlikely monument celebrates the achievements of the bull weevil, naming the creature as the herald of prosperity. That view of the beetle isn't echoed across other parts of the American South. The weevil gleefully destroys cotton crops, and so was once the ultimate nemesis of the farmers of the South, and even the farmers of Mexico and northern South America. The farmers of Enterprise, Alabama didn't feel that way, though. Instead of fighting the weevil, they diversified their crops and started planting things that the beetle wouldn't destroy. Eventually, they realized that they could grow peanuts, and the city developed a whole new economy. The farmers figured that if it weren't for the weevil, they would never have become rich on peanut money, and so they decided to erect a statue in its honor. It's believed to be the only statue of an agricultural pest in the world. As far as we can tell, Modern-day boll weevils are indifferent to the statue's existence.
Subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and enjoy watching new videos on my channel. Thanks for watching and see you soon!